Hey everyone, welcome to the lecture number two. Lecture नहीं वीडियो कहूँगी मैं. Video number two for the important questions of English literature. तो as we all know, और मुझे आप thank you so much for the great response in the previous video. तो हमने जैसे कि last video में दो poems किए थे, which was Twin Gates Fall and second was हमारा The Power of Music. तो इस वीडियो में वी आर गोइंग टू कंप्लीट द पोम्स. तो यहाँ पे लेट्स गेट टू द कंसिडरेबल स्पेक. और हाँ, हॉन्टेड हाउसेस के बारे में टिप्स मांगी है आप लोगों ने, वो आई विल जस्ट शेयर वंस आई स्टार्ट विद द हॉन्टेड हाउसेस. तब तक लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड विद द कंसिडरेबल स्पेक. नाउ कंसिडरेबल स्पेक जो है दैट इज काइंड ऑफ वेरी मेटाफोरिकल. एंड यहाँ पे एक बहुत ही इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज आपको नोट करनी है इन द कंसिडरेबल स्पेक कि इट इज जस्ट अ सेकंड, लेट मी जूम इन फॉर यू. ओके, जस्ट अ सेकंड, ये लोड हो रहा है. यस, ओके. सो कंसिडरेबल स्पेक में हम थोड़ा सा अबाउट द पोम फर्स्ट ले लेते हैं बिफोर एग्जैक्टली स्टार्टिंग विद द पोम के क्वेश्चंस. तो इस पोम में बेसिकली द पोएट हैज टोल्ड अस दैट हाउ in the rat race in the society there is a complete particular set of norms which we follow. Now if a person does not follow that norm, that is uh, said to be like that is criticized and everything. So then he says that in this rat race we have lost our minds, we have lost our ability to think, we have lost our ability to act, and we have no uniqueness of our own. So it explains that how a single mind, which is not even like this is, it is just like a speck of dust, is so mindful. So how that the way and it basically says that how the power to think makes us stand out and shows that we have brains. So this is all about the poem. This is the metaphorical meaning that is given in the poem. Now let's discuss with the questions. So same rahega. I'll discuss 3 extract questions with all of you, and then we will move on to the next poem. So question 1 की lines हैं. Plainly with an intelligence I dealt. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet, yet must have had a set of them complete. To express how much it didn't want to die, it ran with terror and with cunning crept. Okay, so the question 1 is mention the different aspects of might that occur to the poet in these lines. So the poet recognizes the intelligence of might. Okay, just a second. Yeah. The poet recognizes the intelligence of might. He also observes that it was too small to have space for to accommodate the feet, but it must have one pair full. He also observes its determination of not to die as it cleverly and frantically runs to save its life. So this is a very good use of keywords. Let me tell you. So यहाँ पे सारे keywords का in a consolidated way आंसर किया हुआ है. तो this is a great way to answer in your exams as well. Let's move on to the second question. To express how much it didn't want to die, what does it tell about the mind? The line to express how much it didn't want to die highlights the mite's survival instinct. This tells us that the mite, despite its minuscule size or very small size, you can write, possesses an intrinsic will to live and clear sense of self-preservance. The speaker interprets the mite's frantic movement and attempts to avoid being squashed as a conscious effort to survive. The revelation reflects not only on the mite's desire for life, but also the speaker's empathy toward that even the smallest of creatures. It suggests that all living beings, regardless of their size or significance, possesses a natural urge to preserve themselves, which the speaker recognizes and respects. Now let's move on to the next question. Okay. What did it do in the middle of the open sheet and why? So it is basically the mind. Okay. So in the middle of the open sheet, the mite cowered down. Spelling is wrong. Please, um, sorry. In desperation to accept whatever fate was in store and was given by the poet. It did so because the vast expanse, it felt exposed and vulnerable, and at the mercy of the poet, it demonstrated its fear and a sense of having accepted its fate at the moment. So, this can be asked as a metaphorical question as well. So, in this question, it basically says that you know what, sometimes we just accept it as our fate कि अच्छा ये तो होना ही था, कोई बात नहीं, अब हो गया, अब कुछ नहीं कर सकते. Like if something bad is happening or we are not able to, you know, uh, do a particular thing, we say ये तो होना ही नहीं था, let's, ये तो हमारी किस्मत में नहीं है. Don't accept your fate. Try, work hard. If then it does not work out, it's okay. But if you are not even trying, that means just you are a little coward. Okay, so that is very important thing which is told in this. Now next question: how does the poet's attitude towards the speck differ from the tenderer than the thou love of the modern world? So this is a very important question, I would say. It has high chances. The poet's attitude towards the tiny mite differs sharply from tenderer than thou love or the superficial compassion prevalent in the modern world. The poet's empathy towards the speck is based on a genuine recognition of the creature's intelligence and instinct to survival. He spares its life because he sees in it a purposeful display of life, innate will to continue. No matter how small or insignificant the creature might be, in contrast, the phrase tenderer than thou love criticizes a modern tendency toward performative compassion, which is an exaggerated and insincere show of care that is more focused on appearances than genuine empathy. This modern type of compassion is often superficial, driven by societal expectation, trends, or self serving motives rather than a true understanding of concern for that object of that care. On the other hand, Frost's attitude is more authentic and not to display kindness for the sake of societal approval. So, इस को हमने दो पार्ट्स में डिवाइड किया है. In the first part, it is exactly what is given in the poem, that why the poet left that. And next is the metaphorical part. So that is how you are going to answer any question. If there is a metaphorical part to that question, first write the literal answer, then the metaphorical answer. You have to write both. Okay. Now let's move on to the question number E, which is very, very important. This is a googly question, right? Googly question which means that you have to think about it yourself. In the modern world, give an example of tenderer than thou exhibition of love and concern. What is wrong with it? In the modern world, an example of tenderer than thou exhibition of love and concern would be how social media influencers record their acts of charity done done for the purpose of camera and share it with the world to get approval from the society on the good deed they do. This could be helping a destitute with food, clothing, or shelter, or gifting someone on one's birthday. While the act itself may be noble, often it has been found that it is done to boost one's image on social media and to derive commercial advantage from such videos going viral. What is wrong with this kind of exhibition is that it often lacks genuine empathy and borders on hollow tenderness. This type of performative love can dilute the seriousness of the cause and detract from the efforts of those genuinely working towards the positive change, because the act is only done to serve the person expressing it more than the cause itself. Now, don't take it personal. This is not as my thinking for anyone. This is a general thinking that what is trended now, what is something that people do just for the sake of society. So this, I thought that it is generally done, so I wrote. But you can write anything else. If you have other ideas as well, do drop them down in the comment section so we can also see that what your thinking is, because not everyone's thinking can be same. So you can also find some other examples, okay, and let me know. Now let's move on to the question number 2. Okay, इसका lines पढ़ते हैं. But this poor microscopic item, now I, since it was nothing I knew evil of, I let it lie there till I hope it slept. Okay, this is taken from the last or second last paragraph. Okay, that is one. Okay, who is the poor microscopic item? Poor microscopic item is the speck. Okay, and why it is called this term? The poet refers to the tiny mite as the poor microscopic item because of its small size. I'll mark small size and act of helplessness. It suggests that the poet has tender heart that feels sorry for its plight and respects the mite despite its size and vulnerability. Now let's move on to the next question, which says, why did the poet let it lie there? Do you think he did the right thing? The poet chose to let the mite lie on his paper rather than kill it, signifying the act of empathy and reflection. He observes the creature's frantic movements and recognizes it as displaying signs of intelligence, which leads him to spare his life. By letting the mite lie there, just a second, the poet acknowledges its struggle for survival, reflecting on the shared instinct of life that all beings possess, no matter how small or how big. From a moral standpoint, the poet's decision feels like right thing to do because it reflects a broader respect for life. His choice is not driven by sentimentality or recognition in the society, but by compassion and a thoughtful recognition of the creature's awareness and will to live. This small act of kindness, though seemingly insignificant, aligns with the poem's deeper message that life, even if it in its most minor forms, deserves consideration. Okay, this is a very good question. I would suggest you to just read it twice instead of once. Okay, it will help you frame your question, other questions as well. Okay, now let's move on to the question number C. What does since it was nothing I knew evil of mean? What evil is he talking about? The line, since it was nothing I knew evil of, reflects the poet's moral reasoning for sparing the tiny mite. He acknowledges that the creature is not something he associates with malice or wrongdoing. It poses no threat and has not done anything harmful or evil to warrant being killed. The recognition therefore influences the poet's decision to let it live. Therefore, the phrase suggests a lack of animosity or reason to view the mite as deserving punishment. It reflects the speaker's thoughtful consideration of whether the creature deserves harm, and in the absence of many evil intent or action of the poet opts for mercy. Next is, what does the decision to spare it tell us about the poet? The poet's decision to spare the mite shows deep sensitivity to life, even in its smallest form. Rather than dismissing the mite as insignificant, He recognizes its intelligence and survival instinct. This act demonstrates that the poet values all life and can empathize with even the tiniest creatures. It shows that he is someone who thinks deeply about the world around him. More importantly, it also suggests that he follows the tenet of non-violence. His reasoning is that it was nothing I knew evil of implies the poet chooses not to harm creatures that have not done any wrong, which hints at the belief of doing things fairly. Now, the googly question again, you have to think about it yourself, but I will also provide a sample answer over here. Imagine you were the mite. How would you view the poet's decision to spare your life? Describe the thoughts in your head. If I were a mite in Robert Frost's poems, spared by the poet's decision, my thoughts would likely be a mix of relief. As a tiny creature, I would initially sense the immense danger of being crushed by a pen poised above me. In that moments of panic, my instinct for survival would be one of desperately dodging and moving to avoid what could what could be the end of my existence. But when I realized the poet has spared me, I would feel overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. His decision to let me live, uh, yes, seemed like an unexpected mercy, a moment of grace in a world where I am so small and insignificant. I would wonder why this large being, with all its power over my life, with a weapon of destruction in his hand, chose not to harm me. I'm not sure if I would understand that it was acknowledgement of my own struggle for survival, something we both share in the vastness of existence. I can only thank the poet, a kind, thoughtful, empathic figure, one who sees me not as a nuisance or threat, but as a fellow creature trying to survive. Now, just as a reminder, let me tell you that I am taking the questions which are difficult to answer. I'm not taking the easier questions. All of the questions will not be like this. I just took these ones क्योंकि ये थोड़ा सोचने पे मजबूर करेंगे एंड यू शुड नो हाउ टू आंसर सच क्वेश्चंस, वरना इजियर क्वेश्चन के तुम लोग आंसर अपनी तरफ से भी दे सकते हो. सो दैट इज व्हाई आई डिड नॉट चूज देम. सो ये नहीं सोच के जाना कि इस जो मैं क्वेश्चंस करवा रही हूँ वो तो सारे ही डिफिकल्ट हैं तो पेपर भी डिफिकल्ट आएगा. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. इट इज जस्ट दैट आई एम चूजिंग टू डू द क्वेश्चंस which might make you feel a problem if asked in exam. So इसलिए मैं वो पहले से डिस्कस करना चाहती हूँ. Otherwise there is no reason. Easier questions भी आते हैं and you just have to write them और वो easily लिखे भी जाते हैं. So don't worry much about that fact. Okay. Also I wanted to tell you that जैसे अभी हमने इतने सारे questions पढ़े, what you see was particular some particular words were repeating again and again, like tiniest mite, living instinct. ऐसे कुछ क्वेश्चन वर्ड्स थे जो अपने आप को बारी बारी रिपीट कर रहे हैं. those words are called as हमारे keywords. So काफी लोग पूछ रहे थे what are keywords. So these words are keywords which repeat themselves in certain answers, right? So that is why I have underlined also. एक second. That is why I have underlined also कि ये वर्ड्स हैं. तो मेक श्योर ऑल्सो कि तुम वो सब भी ध्यान दो अपने लिए. ओके एंड जस्ट गिव मी अ सेकेंड. इसके बाद हम क्वेश्चन नंबर 3 भी स्टार्ट करते हैं. ओके, लेट्स स्टार्ट विद द क्वेश्चन नंबर 3. When something strange about made me think this was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living mite with inclinations it could call its own. ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पैराग्राफ है आई वुड से, तो इसको प्लीज ध्यान से करके जाना प्लीज. ठीक है, ये पैराग्राफ भी एक बारी बुक से भी दोबारा रीड कर लेना. दिस इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पैराग्राफ. ओके, now let's get started. What was strange about the speck that attracted the speaker's attention? Was it in reality? Describe the speaker's attitude towards the speck. ठीक है, तो अब इसमें हम आंसर देखते हैं. आंसर इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी सिंपल, ज्यादा हमें नहीं देखना. ओके, so let's go. Okay. The speaker is initially intrigued by a small, seemingly insignificant mark on a page. The speck's behavior appears unusual, almost. Just a second. Okay. I think there is a problem in this question. No, okay. ठीक है. So what you say? The speaker is initially intrigued by a small, seemingly insignificant mark on page. The speck's behavior appears unusual and almost purposeful in terms of wanting to escape, which captures the speaker's attention. He notices that the speck moves with intelligence, suggesting it has some form of awareness or purpose, which is strange because it is just a tiny speck. In reality, the speck is a mite, a tiny insect, which the speaker eventually realizes. Okay, let me remove these. तुम्हें पढ़ने में problem आ रही हो. Okay, which the speaker eventually realizes. Despite its small size, the mite's movements are interpreted as deliberate and intelligent, leading the speaker to reflect on mite's survival instinct. The speaker's attitude towards the speck is one of curiosity, wonder, and contemplation. At first, he is intrigued by the speck's seemingly intelligent behavior and admires its survival skills. The speaker even personifies. तो यहाँ पे also one question was, just a second. One question was just a second. So one question was just a second, guys. Give me a minute. Give me a minute, everyone. Just a second. Mm. Just a second. Okay. Its survival instinct skills. The speaker even personifies the mite, attributing human-like qualities to it. There is a sense of fascination with how this tiny creature manages to exist and move with such purpose, despite its insignificance in the grand scheme of things. As the poem progresses, the speaker's attitude shifts slightly toward a more philosophical reflection on the nature of life and intelligence. The mite's survival and movement make him consider the idea of intelligence not only in humans and okay, not only in humans, but in all living creatures, no matter what. Just a second. This is something is wrong with the video that I've posted. Just a second. तुम्हें problem आ रही है कोई वीडियो? Okay, yeah, it was just Google. Okay. Might survival and movement to make him consider the idea of intelligence not only in humans but in all living creatures. No matter how small, there is a subtle irony. Okay. So what I was saying, yeah, उसको भी complete कर दें. I just so there was this question that how to use, basically how to use the poetic device in a particular answer. So this is a very good example. As यहाँ पे देखो personification भी दिखाई है कि कैसे यूज करोगे तुम क्वेश्चन में, फिर उसके बाद यहाँ पे आयरनी भी दिखाई है. तो तुमने बात करते करते ही अपनी सारी चीजें जो है वो इसके साथ आंसर में डाल दी हैं. तो दिस इज हाउ वी डू दैट. ओके, तो ये मेरे को क्वेश्चन आया था तो मैंने कहा मैं आंसर कर दूं यहाँ पे भी. ठीक है, जस्ट अ सेकंड. Speaker's attention to the mite as it seems embody of kind wisdom or awareness that humans might overlook. Sorry for the डिसोरिएंटेशन जो बीच में 2 मिनट हुई है, बिकॉज दिस वाज शोइंग कि कुछ पर्टिकुलर प्रॉब्लम आ रही है मेरी उसमें वीडियो में जो मैंने अभी पहले डाली है ऑफ द पावर ऑफ म्यूजिक एंड उसकी, तो इसलिए आई वाज जस्ट वरिंग अबाउट इट. बट कोई बात नहीं, इट इज नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम, इट इज ग्रेट. ओके, नाउ लेट्स स्टार्ट विद द क्वेश्चन नंबर बी. अब लेट्स फोकस ऑन दिस ओनली. तो ऑल्सो यू माइट थिंक कि ये क्या कैसे क्वेश्चन है। फर्स्ट पहले जो हमने दो एक्सट्रैक्ट डिस्कस किया उसमें आंसर मैंने बहुत ही शॉर्ट में दिए हैं, अब इसमें हम बहुत ज्यादा एक्सप्लेन करके दे रहे हैं। सो आई एम जस्ट शोइंग यू द टू वेज टू आंसर. फर्स्ट way was in concise, just using the keywords. Now second way is to explaining everything. दोनों अच्छे, दोनों अच्छे, ठीक है. What made the speaker realize that the might had a mind of its own as well as intelligence? Give three reasons to justify your answer. So this is based on recall and understanding. Okay, just a second, let me tighten it for all of you. So recall and understanding. The speaker realizes that the might has a mind of its own and intelligence through its actions, which were powerful purpose. So, which were full of purpose, Okay. The might is not aimlessly moving around the page, and instead it was trying to avoid speaker's pen. The speaker notes, however, how the might moves plainly with an intelligence, suggests that the creature is aware of its surrounding and is acting to preserve itself. Similarly, it starts running towards the place where the ink was not dry and loathed the taste or the smell of the ink. It shows it has cognitive awareness. It also shows that it reacts to external stimulus in the manner in which it reacts to the speaker's move to poise his pen in air. The mite was immediately aware of the potential danger. Okay. Now let's move on to the question number C, which is analyze the speaker's decision to let the mite live. What does this reveal about his character? The speaker's decision to let the mite live reflects a deep sense of empathy. He initially sees the mite as a mere speck, but quickly realizes that it is a living creature with intelligence and survival instinct. The decision to not harm him might reveals. So this is a repeat question. See, question के दो forms. Okay, the decision not to harm the mite reveals his sensitivity to life, even in its the smallest form. Despite the mite's insignificance in the overall scheme of things, the speaker acknowledges its right to exist. This suggests that the speaker values life, no matter how small or inconsequential it may seem. Second, it highlights its contemplative nature. Rather than dismissing the speck as unimportant, he takes the time to observe and understand its behavior. Thinking about its intelligence and right to survive, the speaker's ability to reflect on such a tiny creature shows a broader philosophical outlook on one that respects the interconnectedness of all living things. Now let's move on to the D question, which is how would you evaluate the significance of the poem's ending? What is the discovery of a display of mind so important to the why is the discovery of display of mind so important to the speaker? The ending of the poem emphasizes the speaker's discovery of intelligence even in the smallest of the creatures. The display of mind in the tiny mite is crucial to the speaker because it contrasts sharply with his early expectation. The speaker's recognition of the mite's intelligence at end underscores his appreciation for life in its smallest forms. The mite struggle for survival mirrors a larger universal truth about life, intelligence, and existence, which the speaker finds worth contemplating. The display of mind becomes even more significant when considered against the backdrop of human behavior. The subtle irony in the poem suggests that even this minuscule creature exhibits more care and instinct than those who are intellectually capable but often fail to act thoughtfully. Now it's time for the last question. That is, थोड़ा सा मैं इसको ऊपर कर देती हूँ. Okay. What is the central theme of the poem? How does the speaker's action illustrate the theme of the poem? If you have to give your answer a poem, if you have to give the poem a different title, what would it be? and give a reason for your answer. The central theme of the Frost poems, A Considerable Speck, revolves around awareness, intelligence, and the value of life, even in its smallest forms. The poem explores how intelligence and purpose can be found in the most unexpected places, represented by the tiny mite the speaker discovers. It raises questions about what constitutes the life's significance, drawing parallel lines between the mite's behavior and human consciousness. The speaker's action of letting the mite live illustrate this theme of respect for life and human consideration. Instead of dismissing the creature as insignificant, the speaker acknowledges its intelligence and survival instincts. This reflects this reflects the theme that life, no matter how small, is worthy of attention and respect. If I were to give the poem a different title, it would be Survival on Paper. This title captures the essence of the speaker's realization that even tiny creature like mite displays intelligence in order to survive. Survival on paper also will lend an ironic twist because the mite will not just survive in theory but also in practice. This alternate title will highlight the value of life's smallest entities. So with this, we are done with the first point, that is the considerable spec. And if we talk about including the last chapter, last video as well, so we are done with 3 poems till now. And again, half an hour, which is the expected time for a particular poem, is taken. So 3 questions are done. I hope आपको ये वाले questions अच्छे से समझ आए हों. Now I'm going to give you a quick 1 minute break. पूरा 1 minute का, ना उससे ज़्यादा ना उससे कम का. And you can drink your water, do something if you want, and I'll see you guys in a 1 minute. Okay, so the 1 minute is over, and let's get started with the next poem. I said 1 minute means 1 minute. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's get started with the next poem, which is The Haunted Houses. Let's say I think haunted houses से let's before that do Glove and the Lions first, क्योंकि haunted houses में I have to tell you a lot of things, तो वो हम end में ही करते हैं, ठीक है? Let's do this one first. And again, as our thing is going on, इसमें भी हमारे पास how many questions are there? We have 3 extracts in this as well. And the Glove and the Lions के जो extract है, that is kind of very straightforward. तो इसमें तुम्हें ज़्यादा सोचना भी नहीं पड़ेगा, okay? So that is what I'm saying. Now let's get started. Let's start with reading the extract. Okay. Okay. Said Francis then, Faith, gentlemen, we are better here than there. De-Lodge's love overheard the king. Why Francis say this to the gentleman? In Glayhurst's poem, The Glove and the Lions, King Francis say, Faith, gentlemen, we are better here than there, to express his relief or preference for staying safely in the stands, observing the spectacle of lions from a distance rather than being down in the dangerous arena with the beasts. Next is who overhears what Francis say to gentlemen, describe the person's look. The lady who is in love with Count de Dodge overhears King Francis' comment. The lady had smiling lips and sharp bright eyes, which always seemed to shine. What is the thought that occurs to the person when she overhears King Francis? The lady thinks that her lover, Count de Lodge, is as brave can be and would do wondrous things to prove his love for the lady. She sees it as an opportunity to test his love for her. It was a vain thought that did not think of the dangers of the challenge would pose to the life of the man who loved her. It, it was also a move that would show her as coveted greatly by the Count, enhancing her own prestige and boosting her ego and vanity. What happens soon after this line is spoken? Soon after this line is spoken, the lady throws her glove in the lion's pit, prompting the Count to risk his life in order to retrieve it. It was literally walking into the lion's den because his safety was compromised. However, since it felt it was a challenge thrown at him and he had to prove his macho personality, he threw caution to the winds and leaped into the pit. So he is Count the Lodge. Okay, just to justify. वैसे तो तुमने अभी तक तैयारी कर ली है तो तुम्हें पता ही होगा, बट जस्ट टू टेल यू अगेन. ठीक है. So the person thought great glory will be mine. Did it indeed turn out that way? No, it did not turn out that way. The lady expected. Although she thought she would gain great glory by testing Count de Lodge's bravery in front of everyone, the outcome was quite different from what she had anticipated. When she throws her glove into the lion's den, expecting the Count to risk his life to retrieve it, and thereby prove his love and courage, the Count does indeed retrieve the glove. However, instead of earning her admiration or praise, he throws the glove back into her face, in effect, shunning her. This act shows that Count de Lodge saw through the manipulative test of his bravery. He felt insulted rather than honored, recognizing that the lady's challenge was not motivated by genuine affection or respect, but rather by a desire to gain attention and glory at his expense. As a result, the lady's attempt to gain glory backfires, and instead of being celebrated, she is publicly shamed by King Francis. Thus, the poem is a critique of manipulation, display of affection, and suggests that genuine love and courage are not about proving oneself through dangerous or dramatic gestures for the sake of vanity. Now, would you just excuse me for a minute? I'll be back. Just a small minute. I'm really sorry, just a small minute. Yeah, thank you so much for waiting, and sorry, really sorry I had to make you wait, but okay. Okay, now let's move on to the second question. Let's read the extract from the uh, passage. Okay, let's go. What are the lines we have? Okay. By God, said Francis, rightly done, and he rose from where he sat. No love, quoth he, but vanity sets love a task like that. Who is Francis? What does he refer to as rightly done? Just a second, okay. Francis is the king referred to in the poem by the Leigh Hunt. He refers to the act of throwing the lady's glove in her face by Count de Lodge as rightly done. This was after the lady had thrown her glove into the lion pit, challenging her lover to retrieve it. Now, next question is, Francis exclaims, "By God!" What does it convey? So, by God, that King Francis exclaims is an expression of approval. Just a second. Dogs. Okay. By God, that King Francis exclaims is an expression of his approval of Count's decision to throw the glove back in the lady's face. He recognizes the absurdity of the lady's move, which put the Count in an extremely perilous situation. He realizes that the lady was vain and appreciates the Count for rejecting such superficial lady who put him to such dangerous test of love and merely to boost her ego. Next question is, why does Francis say that only vanity sets love a task like that? King Francis recognizes the lady's request for Count de Lodge to retrieve her glove from the lion's pit was motivated solely by vanity. She was not genuinely concerned about Count's safety or well being. She was merely seeking public admiration and validation for having a lover who was smitten by her. By setting such a dangerous task that could have taken his life, she prioritized her own ego over the potential consequences for the Count. Francis understands that true love is based on respect, compassion, and mutual understanding. It is not driven by egoistic demands or a need for public spectacle. By calling out the lady's vanity, he highlights the absurdity of her request and the detrimental impact of self-centered approach to love. The next question is, what is the lesson from the episode for the lady? The lesson for the lady is that true love is not about absurd test of courage. It is about respect, understanding, and genuine care for one's partner. Her demand for the Count to retrieve her glove from the lion's pit was vain and selfish act that puts his life in danger. If the lady indeed learned a lesson from the disgust displayed by the Count and the king's admonition, it would teach her that true love should not be based on ego or pride, but on empathy, respect, and compassion. Now let's move on to the E question. This is very important. Now this is opinion based question. Okay. What would have happened if the Count had not reacted in the manner he did after retrieving the glove? If the Count had not reacted in the way he did, he is likely to have faced continued manipulation and exploitation from the lady. He might have been subjected to further dangerous and absurd challenges, all in the name of love and chivalry. He would have also compromised his own dignity and self respect by submitting to the lady's demand. He would have reinforced the idea that man's worth is determined by his willingness to perform extravagant and potentially harmful acts for a woman's approval. Furthermore, by not rejecting the lady's request, the Count would have encouraged her unrealistic expectations in the relationship. He would have contributed to the normalization of harmful behaviors that prioritize ego and vanity over genuine love and respect. Therefore, Count's reaction was not only personal assertion of his worth, but also a challenge to the societal norm that stereotyped men as macho creatures. His decision to reject the lady's demand was a courageous act that exposed the absurdity of chivalric love and encouraged a more authentic and respectful approach to relationships. Let's move on to the question number 3, which is the last question from this poem. Okay. They Lord's love overheard the king, a beauteous, lively dame, with smiling lips and sharp bright eyes, which always seemed the same. She thought, "The Count, my lover, is brave as brave can be." Which king is being referred to in the above lines? What did the just a second. Okay. What did the lady do? What was the immediate cause for the which triggered that thought? King Francis is being referred to in the above lines. The lady dropped the glove in the pit where ferocious lions were fighting. King Francis remarked that it was safer for them to be seated far above the pit than were in the lion than were in the lions were fighting below. That triggered the thought in the lady's mind that she would test the valor of her lover, Count de Lodge, to see if he was as brave enough to retrieve the lady's glove from the lion pit. How did the Count react to her reaction? What did he do later? Why? As soon as the lady dropped her glove and looked at Count de Lodge and smiled, the Count bowed and in a moment leapt among the lions. His leap was swift, his return was quick. As soon as he regained his place, he threw the glove in the lady's face in anger. This reaction was because he understood her motives, which were not love but arrogance and vanity. Describe the fight between the lions in the pit. This kind of question will test your recall ability, so you have to use keywords. So I will mark your keywords also over here. Okay? Mark with me. Let's take a different pen. The ferocious lions. Ferocious is the keyword. Okay? Just a second. What is happening? Okay. The ferocious lions ramped and roared with horrid laughing jaws. They bit, they glared, and tore into one another. Their blows were powerful like beams. Wind seemed to move alongside their paws. They rolled over each other, okay, and their manes were covered in sand and blood. It was a savage fight. Bloody foam whisked through the air. It made for a scary sight to the royals and nobles assembled who felt safer being away from the lion pit. So this is how you use the keywords. What message is the poet trying to convey through the poem? The message conveyed by the poem is that allowing pride and vanity instead of love. Just a second. Okay. Allowing pride and vanity instead of what is this happening over here? Just a second. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Allowing pride and vanity instead of love to dedicate one's action can be dangerous and even put another person's life in danger. It also satirizes the concept of chivalric love and makes a statement against stereotyping of men as macho creatures who are constantly expected to prove themselves to their lady love. So, poet Leigh Hunt wants to convey that true love needs no validation and someone who truly loves would never put their life of the beloved in danger. The last question from this poem is, what does the glove symbolize for the count, the lady? How would you describe the count's mood at the end of the poem? The count, the glove represents a difficult challenge to prove his valor and chivalry. For lady, the glove is a mere tool to seek attention of everyone present, including King Francis. It is also a representation of her vanity. Just a second. Mere tool to seek attention of everyone's present. Representation of her vanity. तो ये मैं mark कर रही हूँ. These are the keywords. ठीक है. The mood of the counts after he retrieved the glove was furious and angry as he could see through the lady's cunning motive. He was disillusioned with the lady and felt a sense of betrayal because he had believed that the lady truly loved him, but he had been put in harm in such a manner. He realizes that her motive was not so much to get the glove back, but to make public spectacle of her worth. The result, however, was the opposite of the as the lady's spell over the count was broken and count felt hurt and humiliated. So with this, we're done with our fourth poem, which is The Glove and the Lion. Now we are left with only one poem, which I will complete in this lecture only. Otherwise, बहुत सारी videos बन जाएंगी which I don't want. एंड आई विल ट्राई, इवन दो क्या कहते हैं, जो हमारे चैप्टर्स हैं वो 5 हैं एंड उनके काफ़ी सारे लंबे क्वेश्चंस भी हैं, बट आई विल जेन्युइनली ट्राई कि उसको मैं एक वीडियो में कवर करूँ। इफ़ बाय एनी चांस वो एक वीडियो में कवर नहीं हो जा सकता तो प्लीज़ बेयर विद मी, 2 वीडियोस में कवर करूँगी, बट करूँगी अच्छे से, ठीक है? ओके, now there is the next one, which is haunted houses. So this is very important. But let's, before starting haunted houses, let's take a quick 1 minute break again. You can drink water or write down any keywords or mark down any keywords in your treasure chest. Till then, I'll just see you in 1 minute. Okay. So a 1 minute break for all of you. Just a second. Yeah, 1 minute break. It's 50 right now. Let's meet at 52. Okay, yeah, let's get started again. So यहाँ पे uh, we are done with the two poems and we are going to start with the last one. And let's get started. Just a second. Seeing your comments only. Okay. Hmm. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. So one person has asked for the we call that notes for Julius Caesar. Next video, Julius Caesar is complete there. Also, we have asked for the tips for haunted houses. तो exactly मैं वही देने वाली हूँ. तो let's get started. तो अगर haunted houses की बात करें ना, so haunted houses में आपको क्या करना है? I'm telling you very simply. Try to avoid this poem. Okay? इसको अच्छे से करके जाओ. बिकॉज यू नेवर नो कि तुम्हें पेपर में क्या आएगा, क्या तुम्हें आता क्या नहीं आता, हो सकता है ये पोएम सबसे इजी आ जाए, बट अगर इस पोएम के क्वेश्चंस डिफिकल्ट है, ट्राई डूइंग 2 चैप्टर्स और 2 जूलियस सीजर इंस्टेड ऑफ 2 पोएम्स. ओके, ठीक है, बट यू हैव टू डू इट ऑल्सो वेरी केयरफुली, क्योंकि कई बार इसके क्वेश्चंस भी आसान आ जाते हैं, तो उससे भी कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, अगर इसके क्वेश्चंस आसान आए तो ये करो, इट डिपेंड्स ऑन हाउ द पेपर विल बी फ्रेम्ड, और वो मुझे भी नहीं पता लगेगा, मुझे भी तुम्हारा जब बार आओगे तो ही पता लगेगा पेपर कैसा है। बट या, हॉन्टेड हाउसेस को पहले लिटरल मीनिंग से समझने की कोशिश करो, देन गो फॉर मेटाफोरिकल मीनिंग। ठीक है, आंसर में भी ऐसे करना है, पहले लिटरल मीनिंग से आंसर देना, देन फॉर मेटाफोरिकल मीनिंग। और अभी मैं तुम्हें इतने क्वेश्चंस करा देती हूँ इसके हॉन्टेड हाउसेस के, दैट यू विल नॉट फील कि तुम्हें नहीं आती है बाय द एंड ऑफ इट। सो इसमें भी हम 3 एक्सट्रैक्ट्स करेंगे, विच इक्वल्स टू टोटल 15 क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम द हॉन्टेड हाउस। तो अगर तुमने ये पढ़ लिया तो तुम्हें समझ आ जाएगा कि कैसे इसको टैकल करना है। ठीक है, लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। All houses where men have lived and died are haunted houses. Through the open doors, the harmless phantoms on the errands glide, with feet that make no sound upon the floor. In what way has the poet used the word phantom? Why does he describe phantoms as harmless? So, in H.W. Longfellow's poem, Haunted House, the poet uses the word phantom metaphorically to refer to the lingering presence of the past occupants of the house, not as frightening ghosts, but as harmless and gentle reminders of the people who once lived there. These phantoms represent the emotional and spiritual imprints of the people who inhabited the home and whose lives continue to echo in the house rooms and spaces even after their death. The poet describes the phantom as harmless because they do not evoke fear or danger. Instead of being malevolent spirits, they are peaceful, not threatening, presence that simply exist in the background, carrying out their former routines or remaining connected to the house. Their harmlessness reflects the idea that these spirits or the memories they represent are part of natural cycle of life, offering a comforting view of death and the past rather than a frightening one. Next is, in what way is the idea of death represented differently in this poem? The idea of death is represented in more serene and reflective way, and not the usual morbid and frightening manner. The poet represents that as continuation of life's presence, with the dead remaining in the form of gentle, harmless phantoms who still inhabit their former homes. These phantoms do not haunt a terrifying sense, but in a harmless way, they represent memory and the enduring impact of humans' life. The poet emphasizes that these spirits are silent and invisible, representing the lingering influence of the past rather than actual ghosts. In Death, in this view, is not something to be feared but a natural part of existence, where those who have passed away are still spiritually connected to the spaces they once inhabited. Longfellow's approach thus conveys a comforting, almost eternal link between the living and dead. What does the phrase all houses mean in the poem? By stating that all houses are haunted, poets suggest that every home, not just those traditionally considered airy or abandoned, holds the presence and memories of past occupants. The broader perspective expands the concept of haunted houses from a place of fear to a symbol of life's continuity and lasting impact on human existence. He justifies it by saying the phantoms that dwell in the houses are not malevolent spirits but lingering impressions of those who lived and loved these spaces. Longfellow uses the word haunted metaphorically, implying that every house is filled with invisible emotional traces of the past. The significance of all houses, therefore, is that every home they sorry that every home, regardless of its condition, carries the weight of history, the memories of death, and the echoes of life once lived. What errands are being spoken about here? Just a second. The errands refer to the unfinished business that the phantoms seem to have in the world of living beings. Their movement, therefore, is with a sense of purpose, not aimless wandering. However, these errands are not literal tasks but symbolic of the lives once lived within the house. These errands could symbolize ordinary actions like walking through the halls, tending to the household tasks, or moving through the rooms, reflecting the everyday rhythm of life that in the former inhabitants once followed. The phantoms do not interact with the living being, but their errands represent the lingering memory of those who once dwelt in the house, making the past feel present through these silent ghostly routines. Now, after reading this poem, will you be scared to go into a haunted house? How do you think you are likely to react? This is a good question. After reading the H.W. Longfellow's poem, Haunted Houses, I would be less scared to go in a haunted house. The poem offers a perspective on haunting that is not rooted in fear but in reflection and connection with the past. Longfellow describes the phantom in these houses as harmless and silent, suggesting that they are not malevolent or dangerous. Instead, they represent the lingering memories of those who once lived there, continuing their routines in a peaceful, almost invisible way. This portrayal diminishes the typical association of haunted houses with fear or terror. The use of phrases like impalpable impressions as the pictures on the wall evokes atmosphere of quiet presence, not one of disturbance of malice. Thus, the phantoms are the living dead, not in the frightening sense, but as reminders of the past, gentle hold on the present. This gave the impression that a haunted house is more of a space where memories reside, not a place where filled with danger. Given in this interpretation, my reaction would likely be one of curiosity and contemplation. Rather than fear, I would view the house as a space filled with quiet echoes of past lives, and I might feel a sense of reverence rather than dread. Okay, next is what we have. We have no time. Okay, just a second. We have no title deeds to the house or lands, owners and occupants of earlier dates from graves forgotten stretch their dusty hands, and then what do they do? And hold in the mortmain still their old states. The line we have no title deeds represent suggests that the current inhabitants do not possess legal ownership over the houses and lands. However, this is a deeper symbolic sense that not in a literal one. The phrase emphasizes the idea that no one truly owns the house or lands because they have been passed down through generations and physical presence of the living temporary. So Longfellow is reflecting on the impermanence of life and the transitory nature of ownership. Okay, yes, transitory nature of ownership. Just a second. Nature. Okay, okay. Ownership, and then what we see here is where were we? Just a second. अब यहाँ पे यू ऊपर नीचे हो गया ना, so transitory way of ownership I was speaking, right? Yeah. We are here. Where are we? Sorry, I'm just out of my mind right now. Okay. Yeah. Now the portrayal dismisses the typical association of haunted houses with fear or terror. Just a second. ये तो पिछला क्वेश्चन हो गया ना. That is what I was saying. ये तो हो ही गया क्वेश्चन या so we were transitory nature of ownership. Although the present inhabitants may reside in the house, they are merely the latest in a long line of occupants. The phantoms or spirits of those who lived before still metaphorically hold the house, as they have left their memories and spiritual presence behind. These former residents, even though long gone, continue to own the essence of place as the influence persists. The lack of title deeds implies that the living only temporarily occupy this continued the space while the past generation have more long lasting emotional claim. This concept reflects that the poem's theme of continuity between the past and present where no one can truly claim full ownership of something that outlast individual lifetime. Okay, now let's start with the question number two. How can owners and occupants stretch their dusty hands from the caves forgotten? The image of the owners and occupants stretching their dusty hands from the graves forgotten, is a metaphorical and poetic way of expressing how the past inhabitants of house continue to have presence even though they are long dead and perhaps forgotten by the living. The phrase dusty hand symbolizes the physical decay and passage of time as their bodies have turned to dust in the graves. Yet, despite this physical deterioration, their metaphorical hands still reach out, suggesting that their influence or memory lingers in the house. These former owners and occupants may be forgotten in terms of name or personal history, but their spirits or the traces of their lives still persist in the home. This imagery of dusty hands represent the idea that the essence of the past remains active in the present. It emphasizes the continuity between the past and the present, showing the dead are never completely gone and influence endures. Okay. Now let's move on to the C question. What are the graves forgotten? The graves are described as forgotten to convey the passage of time and the inevitable fading of memory over the generation. The names, lives, and identities of those who once lived in the house are lost or neglected by living. As time moves forward, the former owners and occupants become distant figures from the past, and their graves, once perhaps visited or remembered, are now neglected or forgotten entirely. So, the phrase grave forgotten symbolizes the impermanence of human memory and how even those who were once important in their homes or communities eventually fade from the collective consciousness. Despite this forgetfulness, Longfellow suggests that their presence persists in the form of phantoms or lingering spirits that still occupy the house in some way. These forgotten graves highlight the poem's theme of continuity between the past and present. What is the dark abyss alluded in the poem? Dark abyss, which literally means a bottomless hole, could refer to a vast unknown of the spirit world, a depths of the subconscious mind. It is deep, uncharted territory of unknown aspects of our lives, which, like an infinite space of afterlife. It is a mysterious space that separates the world of living from the spirit world, the memory of the past, and the lessons learned from it. It can act as beacon of light that arouses our desires to dwell into the mysterious unknown, further enabling us to achieve better understanding. How does the poet's Bridge of Light contribute to the mystery element of the poem? The poem presents a metaphorical image of bridge of light that connects the world of the spirits and the present living world. This adds an element of mystery and the intrigue to the poem as the bridge becomes a powerful metaphor for the mysterious and unseen influences that exist beyond the physical world. The abstract nature of idea will make the reader imagine the unseen elements that influence our thoughts and determine how we understand the spiritual aspects. The stranger at my fireside could not see the forms I see, nor hear the sounds I hear, but he perceives what is, while unto me all that has been visible and clear. How is the speaker's perception different from the stranger? The speaker's perception is different from the stranger. The stranger views the house as airy and abandoned and lifeless, whereas the speaker, if we talk about lifeless remnants of bygone era, haunted by ghosts and spirits of past. On the other hand, the speaker perceives the house as places that still retain the presence of past lives and memories. For the speaker, the souls of departed continue to inhabit these homes in a meaningful way, creating an enduring connection between past and present. Who is I in the above stanza? Who is referred to as he in the third line of stanza? Who is the present occupant of the house? I in the above stanza is the narrator. He is the stranger by the fireside. The present occupant of the house is the narrator, which is I. Next question. Just a second. Why does the poet feel that all houses are haunted? The poet suggests that all houses are haunted because they carry memories, emotions, and invisible traces of those who lived there before. The poet feels that homes are imbued with spirits of past occupants, not in sense of literal ghosts, but through the lingering presence of their lives, living actions and experiences. Longfellow portrays these haunts as the echoes of human existence and says there's a connection between the world of spirits and the human world. He views these homes as repositories of past, where the essence of former dwellers remain though they are gone, and every soul that departs lingers on earth, revisiting their favorite places. The question is, give any three characteristic feature of the phantoms as mentioned in the poem in Haunted Houses. The phantoms are described as silent, invisible, who do not make their presence known in a tangible way, but exist subtly like shadows or impressions. They move quietly through the houses, gliding around as they go about their errands, but unseen by the living, emphasizes their ethereal meaning. Nature. They are described as harmless, gentle, and do not evoke fear. They do not harm or disturb the living, but instead they continue to hold their old routines and remain connected to the places they once called home, reflecting a peaceful and almost comforting presence. The phantoms are tied to the memories and actions of the former lives. They symbolize emotional and spiritual residue left by those who lived in the house, mourned by the past, but not actively interacting with the present. They leave impalpable impressions in the air. Where in the house do we meet these phantoms? We meet these phantoms at the doorway, on the stairs, along the passage. We also meet them at the table where they are not invited, but they still sit with the guest. We also meet them in the illuminated hall. In other ways, the phantoms are believed to haunt the rooms where the former inhabitants once lived their lives. Their presence suggests that these rooms carry the emotional and spiritual residue of the past. By passing through the doorway and passages, they symbolize the continuity of life even after the person has gone. So, this is from my side for your three poems in this lecture, plus two in the previous one. So, your poems are completed, and I wish you all the very best for the exam. मैंने पांचों की पांचों poems करवा दी हैं, ओके, एंड अभी के लिए तो मेरी तरफ से इतना ही मिलेगा तुम लोगों को गाइस, क्योंकि आई जस्ट नीड टू टेक अ लिटिल बिट रेस्ट, वरना मेरा गला काफ़ी ख़राब है, तो वो ज़्यादा ख़राब हो जाएगा तो मैं बाकी वीडियो नहीं बना पाऊंगी. इसके बाद आई एम गोइंग टू कम विद द तुम्हारे चैप्टर्स, तो जो तुम यहाँ पे देख सकते हो, और जूलियस सीजर के एक्ट 3, एक्ट 4, एक्ट 5 के साथ आऊंगी, एज आई टोल्ड यू इन द लास्ट वीडियो एज वेल कि लेट मी जस्ट क्लिक इट अप। एक्ट 2 एंड 1 इज, अगर मैं करूंगी तो टू मच टाइम ले जाएगा, इसलिए तुम ये सेल्फ करो, ये इजी है। और अगर इसका क्वेश्चन आएगा तुम खुद कर सकते हो। 5 चैप्टर्स, 5 पॉइंट्स और 3 एक्ट्स मैं इसमें से करवाऊंगी। इसमें से हमारा जो पहला टारगेट था ऑफ द 5 पोम्स वो हमने कंप्लीट कर लिया। नाउ लेट्स कंप्लीट द 5 चैप्टर टारगेट, एंड आई विल मोस्ट प्रोबेबली ट्राई कि ये एक ही वीडियो में मैं कवर करवा दूँ। एंड अगर नहीं हो पाएगा तो आई विल टेक 2 वीडियोस, अदरवाइज एक ही वीडियो में कवर करवाऊंगी, बिकॉज आई डोंट वांट द वीडियोस टू बी टू लॉन्ग फॉर यू टू सी। एंड देन जूलियस सीजर आ जाएगी। सेम मैसेज जो मैंने लास्ट वीडियो में तुम लोगों को दिया था, दिस इज अ सॉन्ग दैट आई यूज्ड टू sing and hear a lot during my class 10th, तो दिस इज फॉर यू। फिक्रों में है क्या रखा, कोशिशें तो कर सदा, इतना ही है काफी अभी। सो डोंट स्ट्रेस ओवर अबाउट व्हाट द रिजल्ट विल बी, हाउ द रिजल्ट विल बी, just give your best, and I'll see you guys in the very next one. Till then, bye bye, take care, thank you for watching, and अभी हम मिलते हैं कुछ टाइम में where we do the next chapters. Bye bye, take care, all the best, love you all. ऑल्सो प्लीज कमेंट में मुझे बताना कि तुम्हें ये ऐसे काम करके अच्छा लग रहा है, ऐसे तुम्हें ऐसे ही वीडियो चाहिए, क्योंकि अभी मैं आई विल बी टेकिंग अ 15 मिनट ब्रेक, तो उतने देर में वीडियो लाइव हो जाएगी ये। तो तुम मुझे प्लीज कमेंट में बताओ कि तुम्हें इसी फॉर्मेट में अच्छा लग रहा है कि हम कुछ और फॉर्मेट लेके आए। बाय बाय।